objective here. The president has time on his hands. He controls the narrative, he controls the strike capabilities, and he knows that the policy he set with the blockade has had short-term and long-term effects on the regime and the people of Iran. So he's been very astute in leveraging that time. And so I don't see it as negotiations. It really is capitulation. The president's made it very clear. You will not have a nuclear weapon. You will not have the materials. Surrender that. And you will ensure that the Straits of Hormuz are open to free commerce, that you have no claims for surcharge or approving. Those two things are irreversibly, and the president knows he's in a position to demand those. So I think in that
lost, especially in the political world, your actions should be so focused, so tuned, so correct that you don't have to explain anything, that everybody understands implicitly what you're saying, what you're trying to accomplish. That's the world of politics. When you're explaining, you're losing. What's Donald Trump doing right now? He's explaining. Now, he doesn't have a good story. He's spinning. He's trying to, to correct a huge mistake. But when you're explaining, you're losing. Donald Trump is losing. He's lost the American people. I come back to just the basic fundamental thing with Donald Trump needs to have tattooed on his forehead, or actually tattooed on other people's foreheads so he can see it. Because, he probably looks in the mirror a lot, so tattoo so he can read it. It's the economy, stupid. In the moment you downplay the economic side, because you got to understand this. He may be right, even though he's wrong, because he doesn't know anything about Iran's nuclear program. He says Iran can't have a nuclear bomb. Well, Donnie, they don't have a nuclear bomb. They don't want a nuclear bomb. They're not developing a nuclear bomb. You've made up the ultimate, straw man. It doesn't exist, and it's not going to exist. To say you don't want it to exist means nothing. It's a meaningless statement. But that's the problem. The average American can't pick up on that. But the average American also doesn't understand anything about nuclear weapons, how they're built, all that. They hear the president say that. Now, normally, if the president said Iran can't have a nuclear bomb, most Americans would go, I agree with that. They're not going to sit there and go, well, Skyraider says that they don't have one. They're not going to get into that kind of depth. They're just say, we agree with that. But when you say, I don't care about the consequences for you, for that financial consequences, the problem is when the TV gets turned off, their brain erases the nuclear bomb in Iran, because that doesn't factor into their life on a daily basis. What does factor in is that they're going to go out, the mailman's there, I just did it, and you open up the mailbox and there's a stack of bills. You're going to bring those bills in, and those bills are due. You got to pay them. And you get your paycheck and you start writing checks, or you do it electronically. However you pay your bills, you pay your bills. And you watch the money from your paycheck, that hard-earned money from a paycheck where you have slaved away at a job, maybe 2 jobs, and you watch that money just go da, 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 da. And at some point you want that thing to stop so you can sit there and go, okay, with what's left, I can do X, Y, and Z. But instead, nowadays, it's going da, 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 down even more. And it's getting close to that zero line, where you suddenly get into where you have more bills and you have money to pay the bills, and then your entire reality is going, you think they give a flying you-know-what about Iran and nuclear weapons at that point in time? And the answer is, hell no, they don't care. All they're knowing is that their bank account is zero, bills are due, and their life is about to come to a roaring end. And the president says he doesn't care. That's why Donald Trump has a political problem, because he is totally out of touch with reality right now. He lives in an artificial world of his own making. And, the American public, it's the economy, stupid. And come November, if he hasn't turned things around, he's going to get swamped. You watch I keep using Game of Thrones because I like Game of Thrones, but you remember that scene where they've looted the Tyrells, and they're coming back, and here comes Dany on her dragon. But before Dany comes, you got the Dothraki and the cavalry running down, and the one guy turns to Jaime Lannister and says, "We're about to get swamped." Yeah, you are, because you don't have enough infantry, and they're going to swamp you. Donald Trump's about to get politically swamped. The Dothraki are roaring down on him. A dragon's coming behind, and he's got a thin line of Lannister infantrymen that aren't going to hold. That's Donald Trump's political reality right now.
Yeah, the narrative game this out a bit about what exactly is the hesitancy about restarting this war with Iran? Because we know the Israelis have been the principal, they've been clamoring for this, the principal cheerleaders for this every single day since the ceasefire. The media in Israel has been consistently pushing and pushing and pushing and talking about how escalation. They even said yesterday that escalation preparations are all ready to go, and they're going. It could be any moment. It's just if. It's when, not if. But the narrative gets really, really strange. I don't know if you saw this piece, Scott, but now you have U.S. officials, these, of course, always anonymous U.S. officials, planting a story about how the early U.S.-Israeli goal in the war, when the strikes were initiated on February 28th, was to install Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who I know you remember, Scott. A very strange choice, nonetheless, if his political history was anything to factor in. But they're saying he was going to be the Delcy Rodriguez of Iran, that he had changed and he was working with the Israelis and the United States, and that the strike that Israel fired at his complex where he lives was meant to rescue him from IRGC and instead hurt him, almost, some say almost killed him, but hurt him. And he hasn't been heard from ever since. Scott, what do you make of this? And maybe you could help game through the reality of why there is so much hesitancy since the beginning of these ceasefires. It seems like there are major forces thirsty, especially on the Israeli side, for the restart of all of this.
With that person, then we'll get to the interesting story of Ahmadinejad. The Israelis have been pushing for a major confrontation with Iran for some time now. And they have been trying to get the United States to participate because the Israelis recognize that they cannot engage Iran militarily by themselves and prevail. They must have the United States on board. On February 11th of this year, Donald Trump met with Benjamin Netanyahu and the head of the Mossad, and they sold him a bill of goods. They sold him on not only the threat of Iran, which Donald Trump has bought into hook, line, and sinker. Go back to the spring of 2018 when Netanyahu came and sold Donald Trump on the concept of a Mossad raid on Tehran. They gained access to a nuclear archive. And then he showed him a bunch of documents to prove the Iranians were lying about the JCPOA and they were pursuing a secret nuclear weapons program. And Donald Trump is so stupid and he's surrounded by so many sycophants that they didn't do the obvious things, such as, hey, at least 3 of these documents that you're presenting us as new in this archive are the same documents that you tried to sell the IAEA back in 2004 and 2009. Which were proven to be forgeries, forged by Israeli intelligence to try and do the same thing, create the perception of Iranian nuclear intent that doesn't exist. But nobody had the courage to tell Donald Trump that, or he was just too stupid to understand that, and Netanyahu got away with it. There is no Iranian nuclear weapons program. Never has been, and isn't going to be one. No matter how much people in your audience and elsewhere say they need to have a weapon. Well, they don't want one. So their need isn't manifested by your desire. They don't want one, and they're not going to build one. But Trump made his decision. Now he was sold on that, but more importantly, he was sold on regime change. That the Iranian regime is about to collapse. The inherent weakness of Vilayat Faqih, the supreme, the rule of the supreme jurisprudent, having the supreme leader, the Islamic Republic. He was being sold on the fact that the Iranians are increasingly secular, that this notion of Shia faith doesn't dig deep. The Twelver Shiism is a fanatic religion that exists on the periphery of Iran. It's not part of the fundamental essence of the modern Iranian state. And that if we simply just come in, kill the supreme leader, suppress certain military leadership, we can bring about regime change. And then when regime change happens, we will be able to shut down ballistic missiles, shut down nuclear. In the meantime, we have enough military force to prevent the Iranians from effectively launching missiles we can suppress until we can get a new regime to eliminate. The Strait of Hormuz isn't a problem. They'll shut it down. We'll reopen it. Again, we'll reopen it. The primary tactic is regime change. Remove the regime will open up Strait of Hormuz. Everything will be good. Everything hinged on regime change. The Israelis sold the president on this bill of goods. And the president now recognizes that regime change failed. And that they didn't accomplish this, that the regime is actually stronger today than ever before, and therefore all of the other objectives are unattainable. This is This is the reality. The Israelis sold this to the president, and the president now realizes the Israelis sold him a bill of goods. So where is Israel today? Well, Israel still needs the United States to be involved. Israel is operating under the assumption that it will be able to initiate an action, and through Iranian response, the United States will be dragged back in. That's one of the goals and objectives of this. The problem is the Israelis can't initiate an action without the Americans being complicit in this, because Israel cannot carry out an air campaign against Iran of any significance without close, continuous coordination with U.S. Central Command. And right now, Central Command is shutting that down because we don't want a war with Iran. So where are the Israelis now? Well, first of all, understand that they're getting their asses handed to them in Lebanon. I mean, this is about as embarrassing and humiliating as it gets. The Hezbollah is supposed to be defeated, can't continue and sustain the fight, is literally stomping the death out of the IDF. They're beating them on the frontline contact, but now through the introduction of FPV drones, first-person view drones, many of them having fiber optic cable, they're bringing death and destruction 20 to 30 kilometers into the Israeli depth. The Israelis weren't prepared for this. Hint, hint, America, this is your future if you want to go to war against Russia, because you'll not get anywhere. The drones dominate the skies. Israel can't move without dying. And so they're losing Lebanon. Before, the Israelis were saying, there could be no, we're going to finish Lebanon. No matter what you want to do with Iran, America, we're finishing Lebanon. It's over. And we played the game. We brought in Barak, who sat down and negotiated with it was supposed to be a Israeli-Lebanon negotiation, but Hezbollah wasn't part of it. And Hezbollah is the only voice that counts in Lebanon today when it comes to Israel, because they're winning. They defeat Israel. And so you have Hezbollah winning, which isn't supposed to happen, and Israel has no chance of defeating them. We're at the point right now where Israel has to declare defeat. They can't win. They can't prevail. They're getting beat by Hezbollah right now. So that's a big reality. Two, the United States isn't going to play this game anymore. 60% of Americans don't support Israel. And that number is going to get higher and higher and higher. So what did Benjamin Netanyahu do? Benjamin Netanyahu said, in 10 years, we have to cut off our financial ties to the United States.